Hello students, and welcome once again to Everything You Need to Know to Survive English Class. I, as am always, your instructor, Professor Blake M. Petit. Now, the holiday season, of course, is upon us, and as such, I thought that this week's lecture should focus on one of the seminal works of literature that has, in many ways, shaped our modern perspective on the Christmas season as a whole. I refer, of course, to the classic Elmo and Patsy work, Grandma Got Run Over by a Reindeer. I was, however, informed at the last department meeting that this exquisite piece of poetry is of insignificant academic quality, and would I please shut up about it already? That in mind, I have chosen instead to focus today's lecture on a lesser work, one by the great Charles Dickens. Your textbooks, of course, as always, are available in print or in ebook format from Amazon.com. Of course, if you've been a good little boy or girl this year, then perhaps Santa Claus will bring you one in your stocking instead of that lump of coal you earned last Christmas, Lewis. Let's all turn to page 94. And let's begin. Charles Dickens, born 1812, died 1870, was among the most popular writers of the Victorian era. He made a name for himself, serializing his novels in magazines and in newspapers, which wasn't too difficult as he happened to be the editor. His first hit, The Pickwick Papers, detailed a series of loose adventures of the members of the Pickwick Club, who went around satirizing Victorian-era politics and social mores while solving crimes in their van. With each of his serialized works, readers would wait in rapt attention for each new installment, wondering if Oliver Twist would go hungry again, if Nicholas Nickleby would be able to provide for his mother and sister, or just how great those expectations actually were, and what the hell anybody was supposed to do about it. The serialized format of his work allowed Dickens to shape his work based on the response of his audience, a practice known as selling out by many creators who we probably won't be writing about in literature textbooks 200 years from now, so what do they know? He would often adjust storylines or character traits in order to appease the desires of the reader. For example, in David Copperfield, Dickens could tell his readers were dissatisfied with the tale of a young man's struggles against his oppressive stepfather, so he mixed things up by having his hero make the Statue of Liberty disappear. By far, Dickens' most popular work among modern audiences is the short novel A Christmas Carol, about an old man named Ebenezer Scrooge who simply wants to be left alone to swim in his money bin. His world is disrupted, however, when a bunch of ghosts who disapprove of his lifestyle choices show up and try to force him to change. A Christmas Carol has probably been the subject of adaptation more than any other work except for perhaps the Bible. Between its versions in movies, television, radio, stage plays, comic books, video games, gum wrappers, commemorative coins, Lego sets, officially licensed bacon, and the Super Bowl 29 halftime show, it is one of the most well-known works of literature in the history of the world, and it would be utterly pointless of me to try to synopsize it for you today. A Christmas Carol begins on Christmas Eve, 7 years after the death of Scrooge's business partner, Jacob Marley. Although it's a freezing cold day, Scrooge has no qualms at all about evicting people from their homes, refuses to donate money to the poor, spurns a Christmas dinner invitation from his nephew, and won't even give a scoop of coal to his employee Bob Cratchit, who would really like it if his blood was thawed when he carries home his crippled son, Tiny Tim. In short, Scrooge is a butt munch. When he goes home that night, Scrooge is accosted by the ghost of Marley, who was kind of an ass himself, and is now fated to spend eternity dragging heavy chains around looking for tires stuck in the snow. He warns Scrooge that if he doesn't shape up, he's going to have it even worse when he dies, all the while dangling his enormous chains with heavy money boxes in Scrooge's face and making ooh noises. Scrooge blames the whole episode on eating pizza too late at night and goes to bed. At midnight, the first apparition appears. The ghost of Christmas past sends Scrooge back in time to watch himself as a child spend one miserable Christmas after another at home because his father didn't want him to come home. What exactly Scrooge was supposed to get out of this is anyone's guess, but after settling down and watching 57 It Gets Better videos on YouTube, Scrooge's sister Fan shows up to bring him home. He grows up, gets an office job, meets the love of his life, and they all live happily ever after. Just kidding. No, as he gets older, Scrooge gets greedier, driving off his girlfriend and his family, and finally being left alone. The icing on the cake, however, is the death of his sister, which is heavily implied to have happened during childbirth. If this interpretation of the text is correct, it now means that the real reason Scrooge is so nasty, to his nephew at least, is because Fred reminds him too much of his dead sister, and he can't bear the loss. That's pretty deep for a story whose finest adaptation features an interspecies frog and pig marriage. Next, Scrooge meets up with the ghost of Christmas Present, who kind of looks like Santa Claus in a green robe, and is clearly a righteous party dude, because that's where he takes Scrooge. Specifically, they show up at Fred's Christmas party, where the guests are playing a guessing game. After tossing out such clues as unwanted, unlovable, ungrateful, unhygienic, and butt munch, they arrive at the answer, Uncle Scrooge, which has got to be a knee to the old ego there. Christmas Present then takes him to the Cratchit house, where the huge family is sharing a single chicken McNugget for their dinner. Despite this, little Tiny Tim pulls out his ukulele and sings a song of thanks to old Ebenezer, touching the miser's heart. Yeah, Christmas Present says, too bad he's going to die and it's going to be all your fault. Finally, the ghost of Christmas yet to come arrives, passing through on his way to defending himself from a trademark infringement suit from the Grim Reaper. In the future, Scrooge sees people joyfully, gleefully, celebrating someone's death. And it doesn't matter. Somehow, it doesn't dawn on him that the death that they're celebrating is his. No, not when someone sells his bed curtains to a pawnbroker. Not when people who owe him money rejoice at having extra time to pay it. Not when half the population of Camden Town breaks out in an elaborate musical chorus of ding-dong Ebenezer Scrooge is dead. Finally, in exasperation, the ghost shows him his own tombstone with his own name written on it. What are you getting at? Scrooge asks. When the ghost takes him home, Scrooge rejoices. It's Christmas Day. He hasn't missed it. Santa did it all in one night. He rushes into the streets, showering the poor with money and gifts, and takes Fred up on his dinner offer and arranges to have a whole 20-piece McNugget box sent to the Cratchit house with 3 flavors of dipping sauces. The next day, just to prove he's in the holiday spirit, he pulls an early April Fool's joke on Bob Cratchit, pretending to be angry at him, before instead giving him a raise and buying Tiny Tim some secrets. Scrooge has become a good man, a good friend, and has embraced Tiny Tim's philosophy as his own. Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn. Ah, that Dickens. He knew what Christmas was all about. Well, that concludes today's lecture, my friends. As always, I can be found in my office or on Facebook.com/BlakeMP, on Twitter @BlakeMP, or on Instagram @BlakeMP25. Before we adjourn for Christmas, let us all take a moment to remember the true meaning of the season. You buying as many copies of your textbook as humanly possible. Thank you, and Merry Christmas. Oh, Jughead, you rapscallion.